Hello guys, welcome back to a new video on this To-Do app series. So in the last video we have seen how to modularize your entire To-Do app that we have created over the period. And now in today's session, what we are going to do is we are going to use a service from the Google, that is the Firebase, and we are going to implement, or basically I'm going to store all the data inside Firebase database. Okay, so now what is Firebase? Firebase is basically a NoSQL database hosted by Google on their servers. Now the advantage of using Firebase is that Firebase, you don't have to worry about the infrastructure that needs to be there to set up the database. At the same time, normally if you try to run any database related softwares, you will see that you have a database server. At the same time, you need some language backend software that would actually do the database read and write processes, right? But in case of Firebase, you don't have to worry about that, and even your JavaScript applications and your mobile applications can directly read and write your code without having the need of having a middleman as the like the PHP or Python. So you don't need to have a separate programming language that is going to handle these read and writes. Okay, so that's why Firebase is very popular, where you want to create single page web applications and you want to persist the data just by using JavaScript. Okay, so let's see how to do this entire project in using Firebase. Okay, now once we shift everything to Firebase, then we will have an advantage that whenever we are going to update any data in the to-do list, that will be reflected anywhere in the world. Okay, so you can open your to-do app anywhere and it would show you the same results. Okay, so that is a good thing once you persist your data on a common database server. Second thing is Firebase is a real-time database. That means whatever changes you do anywhere on the web, it will be immediately reflected to your page also at the same time. Okay, so we will see all these features when we start developing, but before that we would have to first create a database, right? So for that you will go to the Firebase console. So I can go to my Firebase. So this is the URL console.firebase.google.com, and once you do that you will have to log in with your account, and once you do that you can create any number of Firebase projects you want. Okay, now it is free for at the beginning, but once your app becomes popular, then you will have to pay some charges to Google, right? So now let's create a to do application. Sorry, let's create a project. So let me call it my to do. Okay, so this is going to be my name of the project. Click continue, and you can see you can enable Google Analytics, for this particular project. So continue, and then you can select an analytics account. So I have already set up one analytics account for you. If you do not want to use this feature, it's fine, you can skip this step, and then just sit back and wait for the project to be created. It may take a little time. Okay, so my project is ready. Let's click on continue. That should open up my project, and this is how it looks. Okay, So now it this particular uh, website gives this particular console gives you lots of features. Like you can see, you can have your own static file hosting that you can do from here. You can have real-time database and cloud firestore. Okay, so these both are the databases. Then if you want to store some images and assets, so you can store it using this particular service. You can also run uh, custom functions, in which case you don't have to worry about setting up a server just to process those functions. Then you also have machine learning features that is still in beta. So and very important, authentication is also there. So this we will cover it in the next part. Okay, for the time being we will be working with real-time database. Okay, so let's go into the real-time database. And you can see basically it is just telling you that store and sync data in real time. That is what this is all about. Okay, so now let's create a database. So the first step would be to create a database, and as soon as I click on that, it says start in locked mode or start in test mode. Okay, so you can start in locked mode. Okay, in locked mode you can see the read and write is disabled, it is false, so right now it is disabled. Or if you go in test mode, you can see this is what the rules are. Okay, so it will be valid for some amount of time, but I like to do is I go into the lock mode, click enable. And once your database is created, so this is how it looks, then you just go to the rules section, and instead of false you can just say true, and here also true. Okay, so I have just made I have allowed read and write to this particular database. Okay, so let's publish. So this is a very, you can see your security rules are defined as public, so anyone can steal, modify, delete data in your database. So obviously this particular setting is very wrong, but since we are just learning, that's why we have I have enabled publicly read and write. But in real world scenario, what I would be doing is I would enable the authentication, and only authenticated users can read and write. Okay, something like that I can put it over here. Okay, so but that will be covered in another video. So right now I'm just made it into true, and write also true, and that's it. So now we can read and write from any app. Okay, so once that is done, now you can see I have my to do my app over here. Okay, so now next thing would be to import data into your database. Okay, so this is your root. So now here to import your data, you can start by creating a object like this. Let's say, let's call it to do's. Okay, so this is my child that is going to have to do's as the key. So in this object, and inside that I will be having the first array. Okay, so I'm putting 0, and inside that I'm going to have, let's say, title, drink milk. Okay, then I can have I can click on add, and that completes my one particular node. Okay, now if you want to add one more, like in our case, in the first object itself you had status also, so you can go to 0 and click on plus again, and you can say status equal to pending. Okay, so click on add. So now you can see my to do's array has one first element as an object which is status pending and title drink milk. Okay, so let's now add one more element that is going to be index 1, and inside that again I'm going to do title and drink coffee, click on add. So now I have this. Let's add status. Okay, so now I have two entries, that is state entry number 0, that is key 0 is drink milk and key 1 is drink coffee. Okay. Oh, my spelling. Okay, so next, this is one way of doing it. This is the manual way, and the second way would be to create a JSON file. So I have already created a JSON file. I will just show you. So what I've done is I have created a JSON file, something like this, which is basically just an object with the key to dos, and inside that there is an array of objects, and each object has two values, two properties, that is title and status. Okay. And that's it. So now once you have this, and save it as any file but .json extension, and once you have that, then you can come back to your real-time database, click on these three dots, and you can say import JSON. Okay, so when you click on that, you can browse and go to desktop where it is stored, click over here and click import. And once you do that, you can see it will immediately replace whatever was there inside with the data that you have uploaded. Okay, so now I have 4 entries, 0, 1, 2 and 3, and everything is perfectly reflected. Okay, so now these are the two ways in which you can put data inside this. Okay, now so till here everything is fine. Now we know how to set put data inside our database. Now let's see how to add this to our project. Okay, so now this is the I'm go back to the initial page, that is project overview, and if you look at it, you have 3 buttons over here. In fact, there are 4 buttons, and this is the buttons which will help you in embedding this particular Firebase database into these particular application. Okay, so if you want to put it inside iOS, so if you click on this, it will get you started and how to, what steps to be followed, right? And if you want, if you are developing a game using Unity, you can use this particular button, or else in our case it's a web app, so we are using JavaScript, so you can just click on this particular button. And now the first thing would be to register it, right? And let's register our web app. Okay, so let's call it my to do app, and if you want hosting for this app, then you can enable this, otherwise you just click on register app. And once your registration of this particular thing is done, it will provide you with a code snippet, which is what you have to use to connect to the database. Okay, so let's copy this. Okay, and in fact I don't want to copy the entire thing. What I am going to do is I'm going to copy the first line. So this is basically the Firebase app. I'm going to copy this. Okay, and come over here and come to the bottom before my main.js. I'm just going to paste it on before that. Okay, so I'm going to paste that particular file, sorry, it's the app to over here. Okay, now this is the Firebase code. Okay, now this is only the Firebase app, Firebase SDK, right? And now usually what the way this works is based on which features you want, you just add those libraries over here. Okay, so that makes it much more productive. But in my case, I don't want to specify each and everything separately. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to just replace this app with firebase.js. I'm just going to remove that dash app at the end. So what this particular file does is it imports everything, whatever libraries are there in Firebase. It imports everything. It's absolutely bad idea, but it's a quicker way of doing it. But in a production environment, it would be better if you uh, select only those libraries which you are actually using. Like for example, firebase.app will always be there. Then if you want to use database, then you can just add firebase.database dash database, so like that. Okay, so that's it. Once you add this, now we can start our testing. Right, next, let's save it. Next part of the snippet is going to be the second part. We don't require because we have replaced it with firebase.js, so we have removed this part. So this includes everything, so it also includes analytics, so no need to include it. But this part is very important. Okay, so this part, what it does is it initializes your app, and it sets the all the API keys and remaining things. Okay, so all these things are done by this. So this Firebase config is very important. So let's start developing now. So now we have imported the Firebase library. Now let's see how to handle our module. Okay, so now if you remember, in the last video we have created modules for the storage of the to-dos, right? So this is one example of it, so where we have used local storage. So let's save this as, let's call it as Firebase. Okay, and let's save it. So now this module is going to use the Firebase, the logic for the Firebase, connecting to the Firebase, right? So let's replace this by Firebase, and that's it. So now we are we are going to use Firebase for connecting this particular module to connect to the Firebase server. Okay, so now everything related to Firebase and to-dos, storing the to-dos on the Firebase server, must be there inside this. Okay, and there should be nothing in the main.js. So that is what the modularization that we have done. Okay, so now the first thing, let's start with the constructor. So uh, now obviously the first step in the constructor is to get the existing to-dos. Okay, so if you look at the database, let's so if you remember, we have imported some of the to-dos, so that should be retrieved, right? So we already have a function called get to-dos. Okay, and that function can get the to-dos for us. But then the problem is that currently we don't have a connection to the Firebase database, right? So let's first set up the connection. So for that, I will just copy the code that was there from here. Okay, so all this code I will copy and paste it inside the constructor. Okay, so now what is basically happening is I'm creating a Firebase config object, and then if you remember, I have added that script tag over here, firebase.js. So it is using that to initialize the app using this config, and then I am also enabling analytics on this particular connection. Okay, so once that is done, now we are ready to uh, connect to the database and get some data, right? So now let's see how to connect to the database. Right, now to connect to the database, you have the command called Firebase. Okay, so Firebase dot database. Okay, dot ref. Okay, so now all this I'm getting from the manual that is the docs on the website, Firebase website. So this will give you a, a reference to the database, right? Real-time database. Now this I can store it somewhere. So let's store this inside an object called, let's call it dbref. Okay, so I've stored whatever is returned by this inside dbref. Okay, next, now this will give me access to the entire database, right? But I don't want the entire database. I just want to retrieve the to-dos part of it, right? Now to get the to-dos part, I have to get the child node from this. Okay, so I can say that this dot dbref, that is the Firebase database object, dot child. Okay, so I'm just going to get the child. Okay, and it now in this the parameter is going to be which child do you want. Okay, so if you remember, the name of the child is to do's. Okay, so let me just show you what I am trying to do. So if I go back to console and go to the real-time database, and once it loads, so when I called this particular line, okay, so that is Firebase database ref. Okay, so it is basically giving me this particular object. Okay, but I don't want this entire thing. I just want to get the to-dos from it, right? So to-dos is our child, right? So that is what I'm doing in the second part. And once I get this also I can store it in let's say to-dos ref. Okay, let's call it to-dos ref. Okay, so now I have got a reference to this particular child. Now once I have this, then it would be very simple to get the to-dos. So now to get the to-dos, I just have to do just run a simple command. So now obviously uh, it is running over here, right? So if you look at it, the function is already running as per the last tutorial. What it is doing is this dot to do's, it is running this particular function, this dot get to do's. Okay, now if you come down and look at the get to do's function, it is actually running the code to get the data from the local storage. Now what we have to do is, instead of this, we are going to do a request to the server and get the data from the server. Okay, now for this what you can do is, now you already have a ref to the to-dos object, right? So you have this. Now you just want to get all the data from there. Okay, so now to get a data once or read it once, you have a command called once. Okay, and inside the once command you just have to mention an event, and whenever now there is a event called value in Firebase. Okay, sorry, value. Okay, so this particular function, what it does is as soon as the data is downloaded from the Firebase database, this particular event is called. Okay, that is the value event is called. Now once this value event is called, it returns a promise. So now to handle that promise, we have seen in the promise tutorial that whenever a promise is returned, we have to run then. Okay, so when I run then, now here I can handle that promise. Okay, so I can say I can call this as any variable. It is going to be either an anonymous function or an arrow function, whatever you prefer. I'm using an arrow function over here. Now here it is going to accept a variable, that is the data that is going to be returned. Okay, now let's see what is actually returned in this case. Okay, so let's do console.log. Okay, and then let's run snap. Okay, so let's save it and go back to our app. Let's inspect, go to console, and you can see I get something. Okay, and there is some data coming out, but now to get the value of that, you can just do .val. Okay, so if you run snap.val, okay, there is a function called val which actually returns whatever is the value returned from the server. Okay, so let's see what is returned, and if you open this, you can see something is returned. If you open this, you can see exactly whatever we have stored on the server, it is returning that. Okay, so it's an array. If you look at it over here, it's an array of objects of 4 elements, and we also getting 4 elements over here. Okay, perfect. So I am getting the data. So now let's see how we are going to render it. Okay, so let's do one thing. So what I can do is I can return this. Okay, so let's see how to handle this. So what I can do is just return this value, because this is going to be handled. So the get to dos part is just going to get the value, but it is not going to assign it to the to dos. So I'm just going to return this, and again this particular thing, that is the promise. Now this promise also has to be returned. Okay, so for that I will just put a return over here. So this return is going to return the snap.value to the then function, and then this return is the return for the get to dos. Okay, so that means when I call get to dos over here, so I can just modify this a little bit. So now it is going to be an asynchronous function, right? So now to handle this, as you see, I'm using a promise, right? So let me just run this and show you what is the return value of this. Okay, so console.log, and let's do a console.log and run it, and you will see that it is actually returning a promise. Okay, so as soon as you see something like this, that any function returning a promise, that means this particular function is returning a promise, then you should remember to use .then over here. Okay, so I'm just handling the promise, and once that is done, now I can again use an arrow function, and let's say, and what this then is going to receive is whatever is returned by this then. Okay, so this particular then is returning snap.val, so that will be returned over here. Okay, so let's get that. Let's call it let's say data. Okay, so let's call it data, and now this data has to be stored inside the to dos, right? So let me just show you before storing it. Let's do a console.log and see what is the actual thing that is being returned. Okay, so let's save it, come back, and that's it. You get the same data. Okay, so whatever you return from here, you get it over here. Okay, so once you get it over here, then the things are very simple. You just do this dot to dos is equal to data. So now you have done this part. Okay, and you have saved it inside the to dos. Now 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 you want to, once you update your this thing, that is your to dos, you should render your table, right? So to render it, this is the function, right? So I will just cut it from here and render it inside. Okay, so that as soon as the data is changed, the table renders. Okay, so now let's save it, let's come back, and that's it. You get uh, the data from the Firebase server now. Okay, so um, let me see what is this console.log. Oh, it is coming from here. So let me just remove this and save. Okay, that's cool. So now it is working, and now the remaining thing is working based on the local storage, right? So we have not yet updated that part, but at least it is retrieving the data from the Firebase store. Okay, now just to prove that it is actually being retrieved from the Firebase, let's go over here and let's make the first one, drink milk complete. Okay, and press enter, and now let's come back over here, refresh, and you can see it works, right? So it loads drink milk as complete. Okay, so that is cool. So that part is working now. But if you look at it over here and if you refresh, so initially when it is loading, so there is some data that is showing up which is actually coming from you know the old data that was there. Okay, that is from the to dos, right? So to reset that, what you can do is, now this is going to be a promise, so this will take a little time. So before that, what you can do is you can just say that this dot to do sorry, is equal to an empty array. Okay, so that initially it is empty till the time it retrieves the data from the database. It will be empty, and immediately after it is empty, so that our table also looks empty, I'm going to render the to do. Okay, so let's try it out. So you can see no to dos, and then it comes up. Okay, so if you are refresh and show it to you again, you can see initially there is no to dos, and once it is loaded, it shows me the to dos. That's cool. So that is done. Now let's see how to handle add to do. Okay, now to handle add to do, what we are going to do is uh, we are let's see what is going on over here. So add to do, we are adding the to dos to the to dos array, that is using push, and then we are running save to dos. Okay, so now I think this is proper. So all I have to do, I don't have to worry about anything over here, right? So all this is perfect. All I have to do is just change this particular logic, and when I save the to dos, instead of saving to the local storage, now I'm going to save it to the Firebase. Okay, Firebase store, right? So let's see how to handle that. Okay, so it is going to be very simple, and it you will love this idea of how simple Firebase is. Okay, so again, now we have to store it to the to-dos on the Firebase, right? Now to access that, we already have created this particular object, to-dos ref. Okay, if you remember from here. Okay, so the child node to-dos, so we have added that to the object, and inside that, whenever you want to set it to something new completely, you can do this. You can run this function set. Okay, and inside this set, you just have to provide the new value that you want to set. Okay, and the new value is stored inside this dot to dos. That's simple. Okay, so now what happens is, whenever this particular command is run, whatever is inside this dot to dos is going to be stored inside is going to be sent to the Firebase server from this command. Okay, now this is not the best idea to do this, because if your to-do list is very large, then just for changing one entry or making one marking one entry complete or pending, you will be updating the entire list. Okay, so that is completely a bad idea. There are better ways of doing this, but I am just showing you how you can use Firebase over here. So I'm not worried about that much about optimization or making it proper software, but rather I am just making it work so that there is minimum amount of code changes in our in our program, right? So once this is done, you will see that I think that is it. If I save it, let's come back, and now everything is working. And let's mark this complete and see what is, yeah, perfect. So make breakfast is now complete. Okay, so now let's say the last one, that is sleep, so that is pending, right? So let me take this side by side so that you can see what exactly is happening. Okay, and okay, so this is the database, right? And this is the browser where the app is running. So if I, let's add a new let's say, let's add a new task, do coding. If I enter, you can see immediately a new to do is added, and you will get this particular saying it is pending. And if you mark it as complete, immediately this changes, right? Okay, that is perfect. But now let's suppose from here, that is from here, somebody changes, or from some other browser somebody changes this to pending. And if I save, you can see that is not reflected over here. So drink milk over here is right now uh, complete, because that was the previous state, and I have changed it over here as pending, right? So then why did not it reflect? So let me refresh and show you. Now when it loads again, you can see now it is changed, right? So that means that real-time updation is still not working. So that is the next thing that we have to work on. So let's work on that. So for that, what we are going to do is, before, I'm just going to make a copy of this and paste it over here, and I'm going to rename this function as monitor to dos. Okay, so I'm going to change this function as monitor to dos, and here I'm going to change the way this is going to happen. Okay, so let me do one thing, remove all this, and instead of this, I don't have to return anything because I don't want a promise over here. What I want to do is, I want to run this command once. Okay, so that is going to be run after everything is done. That means in the constructor, after everything is done, I'm going to run monitor to dos, and this monitor to dos is going to go through your changes in real time, and whenever there is a change on the server, it will immediately update your app also. Okay, so let's see how that is done. Okay, so for that, the function is, again I'm getting the to dos ref, and then I am doing, instead of once, I am going to do on. Okay, so this is the difference. So this on function, now it's again it is a continuous function, so it is going to continuously watch on any changes, whereas once will run it only once. Okay, so now again I'm going to do a value. Okay, so that whenever there is a change in the value, this particular function will be initiated. Okay, so once that is done, I can now create a callback to handle that. Okay, so again you can use an arrow function or anonymous function. So I'm using an arrow function over here, and let's call it snap. Okay, so that is what the normal name. You can select any name you want, so I have selected snap over here, that is short for snapshot. Okay, so once I get the snap, then I can again do the same thing, that is, just let us just check what is the value that I'm getting. Console.log, I can do snap.val to get the actual value that is getting returned. Okay, so once that is done, now let's go back to our browser and the Firebase store. Okay, so let's bring them side by side, and let's once we have this, so everything is working perfectly. Now let's change something. Okay, so let's change something so that that particular, okay, wait, one thing I forgot is I have not called this function. Okay, so let's come over here and call this function, this dot monitor to do's. Okay, so I have called this function, so now it should work. Okay, so once that is done, now I can come back and let's change any one of this entries so that that particular function is triggered. Okay, so let's say complete and press enter. You can see that particular function is triggered and you get the data back. Okay, and that too with the updated data. You can see now it is complete, right? But it is not updating the table. Okay, so that means there is something left. Okay, first of all, you will have to update the this dot to do's uh, whenever you are getting a new data. Okay, so I'm getting a new data in snapped val, so this I can store it in this dot to do's. Okay, so once that is done, now to do's is getting updated. Now whenever to do's gets updated, you now this will update the array, not the table that is being shown over here. Okay, so this table is not updated. Now to update the table, you can run this dot render to do. Okay, so once you do that, the table also gets updated. Okay, so let's see now if it really works. Let's open the Fire store over here, Fire Realtime Database on the left and our app on the right. So I can mark anything pending or complete. You can see it is updating over here. But if I change it over here also, let's make the second one, that is make breakfast pending. Okay, and if I press enter, you can see it works. Okay, so it works in real time. Okay, now to show you the real advantage of this, let's suppose you have a friend who is actually sitting somewhere else and you both do items like this, and this is your friend's PC. I'm opening it in the Mozilla. Okay, and this is your PC. Okay, so on the right you have your PC and on the left you have your friend's PC. Okay, so now the advantage of setting up it like this is whenever your friend marks anything complete, just look at on the right side on your PC, immediately that should also get reflected. Okay, so when your friend marks it complete, immediately your PC also says it is complete. Okay, immediately when your friend adds a let's say buy new watch is the new to do, as soon as I enter that, your PC also reflects that particular thing on real time. Okay, so you can see everything to and fro, it works perfectly. Okay, so this is how you can use Firebase app to persist your data on the server, Firebase cloud server. Okay, I hope you understood this particular tutorial. It was a simple tutorial to just give you an introduction to the Firebase. There are lots and lots of more features of this, like for example in this case, like if I wanted to add a new to do, so there is an option where you can actually directly put the data to the server. Okay, rather than putting it to the to do's and then saving the to do's, you there are functions to do that. Like you can use the update command to do that. There is also a remove command in the to do's ref, so you can run that command to remove any particular element from the array. So you can also do that. and you can also monitor the way I have monitored. I think this would be the best way to monitor the to-dos child, so that anything if changes, that can be notified to you. But in real world scenarios, in some other app, you would not want to monitor the entire child. You may want to monitor certain parts of the child, so that also you can specify. So all these things are there. We will take another tutorial where we will deal with all these things later. Okay, but for the time being, this is the to do app that we are going to that we have developed. Okay, and now the only problem here is that now this app, once it is hosted, everybody who opens this website will get the same to-do list. Okay, so anybody can change my to-do list, so I don't want that. Okay, so what we are going to do in the next video is to create authentication, where the user, to see their to-dos, they will have to first log in, and then they can see their own to-dos rather than seeing a general to-do list. They can only retrieve from the server their own to-dos. Okay, so that is what we are going to do in the next part of this particular series. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this. I will see you in the next part of this particular series. Thank you.